All right, everyone, and now that the race is fundamentally between Donald Trump and Joe Biden, it's time to officially endorse Donald Trump for the U.S. presidency. This might seem, unnecessary to most people because it's no secret that I support Trump. But I figured I would do an official endorsement and just sort of, toot his horn for him because I know he's a very humble person. He doesn't like to brag about his accomplishments. I figured I would put it out there specifically why I intend to vote for him as opposed to Biden or staying home or even supporting the LP, who I'm not sure who their candidate will be, not that it really matters at this point. The reason I won't support the LP is this. As a person who is fundamentally libertarian, in the general sense, even that term doesn't really encompass my views anymore. Classically liberal, constitutionalist, paleocon. I don't even know what to call myself at this point. I'll have to make up my own political ideology. It'll be like a little grab bag of the best parts that I perceive of in other ideologies. The LP sold out. Gary Johnson himself would have been okay, but he's kind of a goofy dude, and really he managed to make lemons out of lemonade somehow, because you had a situation where Hillary Clinton's nuts. Trump was within the Republican Party not actually that well liked at the time. Now you've screwed the pooch. He's got record approval within the GOP, way higher than Ronald Reagan's, by the way, at this point. The LP managed to squander that, and Johnson did okay nationally. He was in the double digits in many states, but they could have done better. They decided instead to try to wine and dine Democrat voters by saying, oh, we support open borders now, basically fuck the U.S. worker, at a time when immigration was a main issue. It didn't really make a whole lot of sense from a strategic perspective. So it sort of soured the flavor of the LP for me. I still like the fundamental core message of libertarianism, but this is a party. I don't have any party loyalty anyway. I won't vote for Joe Biden because Joe Biden is demented. He swears up and down he wants a female VP, a female running mate, so the first female vice president. That means, in my estimation, in my personal belief, Joe Biden, who has health issues, he's had several aneurysms, he has dementia, it's not a conspiracy theory, anyone looking at him knows that he's got cognitive issues on a day-to-day basis. That means that the first female president of the United States probably would not be an elected official, they would be an appointed official. They would have been there because they were the VP. I'm uncomfortable with that. I think that's a terrible precedent to set. What would have happened? Can you imagine how much different politics would be if Obama had been someone's VP and then the president, has a stroke or something, he ends up becoming the president because of that? It would have caused enormous stress civically. Again, the objective side of it is, okay, well, this person who was kind of a runner-up anyway, who at least has some on-the-job experience, is now the president. It's not, officially speaking, optically, it's a problem. It's not a big problem in the fundamental sense. The VP gets briefings and stuff, sort of knows what's going on, and would be the next most qualified person in that case to lead. But the optics of it are terrible. The optics of it would lead to greater crisis. So I'm uncomfortable with that. Also, when I look at Joe Biden's record, I can say he has fundamentally flip-flopped on a dozen issues in order to campaign as a Democrat in a party that's been dragged far left. So to be a moderate, to be considered sort of in the center of the pack, Joe Biden had to go what would have been considered far left in 2016. He almost sounds a little bit like 2016 Sanders. Or certainly some of the leftists from 2012, 2008 would be about the same as Joe Biden, and yet he's considered a moderate. So the Democrats have gone off a cliff. Now let me look at Trump's successes. First and foremost, I'd say his pandemic response is definitely on the list now as far as successes. He has outmaneuvered the Democrats a dozen times already. The travel regulations that he imposed, expanding travel regulations to people who had gone to and from China, that was a good idea. Freeing up a stimulus. Now, of course, I personally, from my own libertarian perspective, I opposed closing things up in the same degree that the government did and stimulating the economy, which I saw as unnecessary. By the way, history, I think, will remember me fondly for being in the minority who actually believes that. Conceivably, though, in an optic sense, he's done well. He did, in the optic sense, which is one of the big things the president does, diplomacy and be sort of the daddy of the country figure, he has managed to keep the nation largely calm. That's very important. He's done a good job, at least in that sense. So I'll give him a win for that. A lukewarm one on that other end, but technically a win. Number two, tax reform. When I look at my taxes and I see how much of my self-employment income I'm able to write off in the general taxable total because of Trump's tax reforms affecting that income specifically, I say, thank you, Donald. You saved me like $4,000. That's really nice. Disproportionately, small businesses, entrepreneurs, and the working and middle class are the ones that got his tax relief. This is, by the way, abnormal for a Republican. Can you imagine if it had been Bush? 99% of it would have gone to the one percenters. Yeah, absolutely. The neocons that complain about Trump, oh, Trump is being a meanie and stuff. He's the one giving the middle and working class tax relief. Dude, people who are self-employed in the middle class cleaned up with regards to Trump's tax reform. I think it's great. People are complaining about getting smaller tax refunds at the end of the year. Yeah, if you're paying no taxes, I can imagine that might affect the amount that you're getting back. But that's been good. Number 3 is diplomacy. His North Korea negotiations ultimately didn't lead to a peace resolution, but they did lead to 2 things. Number 1 was optical. It was only in perception. For the first time, the U.S. president and the North Korean leadership were able to get together since the 50s. Were able to get together directly in neutral ground and have a party, so to speak. Trump, the first U.S. president to step into North Korea. That's important optically. Kim Jong-un follows suit, shakes his hand, gives him a hug and stuff. The era of warmer relations helps to thaw out that last vestige of the Cold War. And number 2, it jump-started negotiations directly between the 2 Koreas. And really, this was, I think, Trump's goal, to get the ROK and DPRK to shake hands, play nice, and largely start getting along. They've taken out a bunch of landmines along the border. They've destroyed a bunch of border watch posts. They've helped to repatriate thousands of human remains. That has a lasting impact. It shows that there is the possibility of peace, which is something that Obama never accounted for. He acted as though it was impossible. Clinton never accounted for it. Once North Korea stabbed him in the back, Bush wanted to nuke him. Trump's the only one who's bothered to tackle the issue. It was ignored by presidency after presidency. Trump came in, within a week he had deals secured, between the 2 Koreas at least. I consider that a win. We're not in any major wars anymore in the Middle East. We've scaled down our troop presence in most of these areas. Yes, I realize the Syrian civil war rages on. We're largely uninvolved. I do not care about other countries choosing to slaughter one another. Now, if there's a genocide or something, if we have to, fire a couple of missiles off to kill a dictator because they're going to kill 1 million kids or something, okay, maybe you can justify that. We don't need to be in the Middle East. We've largely scaled down in Afghanistan, too. I realize that making deals with the Taliban isn't exactly on anyone's happy things to do list, but it's better than it was before, at least. Certainly better than it was under Bush and Obama. The Middle East at peace. Yeah, there's several wars going on, but, it's better than it used to be. It's pretty sad, but I consider that a win. He hasn't gotten us into any major new conflicts. The closest he's come is saber-rattling against Iran, and he was going to do that anyway. We know that, and we practically pay Trump to do that anyway. Frighten these people over there to keep them from doing anything stupid, and ultimately there will be peace. Someone shoots a couple of rockets across the bow of a ship once in a while. Sometimes a village gets razed, but by and large, there's some degree of stability in most places there. That's a good thing, and Trump has been foremost in this. Number 5, building the U.S. economy. Now, I realize that right now, because of the coronavirus pandemic, this is sort of on the back burner. It's funny how economic issues went to the back the second people started getting sick. That being said, it's largely a win. The Trump economy is strong enough, so right now, most of the economy is closed up, and yet the markets have stabilized. They finally probably bottomed out. They're stabilizing and even rising in some metrics now. Only Trump could possibly formulate an economy strong, robust enough so that investors wouldn't get completely nervous and abandon ship. Only Trump could have fomented this. And then that's, of course, attended to his pandemic response. Number 6 is the border. Believe it or not, according to the neocons, the never-Trumpers who are still salty about him being the president of the United States, he hasn't accomplished anything. Oh, he abandoned the border. He sold everyone down the river as soon as he got his money. No. He spent 2.5 years negotiating and haranguing in legalese through the Ninth Circuit. He finally got around them through SCOTUS. He finally got around obstruction even among his own party in the legislature. Signed off the first border deal, which included various provisions with the exception of his wall. And it was sort of like a Stimson-Mazzoli thing. That way, He sets the stage for everything else to line up except for his wall, and then he gets his funding anyway. He gets it from the Pentagon, it gets blocked, then the SCOTUS blocks the blockage from the Ninth Circuit. Yet again, Trump wins again. Now, I know that most of the fence that he's been putting up, if you can call it a fence, is replacing existing barriers. There's a big difference between a 30-foot thick steel embankment with a foundation that goes 20 feet into the ground. That's a little more effective than a single layer of chain link with a little vehicle barrier on one side. A little bit more effective, a little bit more imposing. He's built hundreds of miles of this already. It makes much more sense to do the retrofitting first anyway while you're trying to negotiate and buy people's land along the border so that you can construct the rest. You got to reimburse people. You can't simply swoop in and say, okay, I'm giving you $1 for your land, buy, pack up. It takes time because it gets locked down in court. Trump has been picking away little bit by little bit at the border wall. And so people wake up on election day, he's built 200-300 miles of new border too. He won. He won completely on immigration so far. Now, I know what some of you may say, well, he hasn't kicked out every illegal immigrant yet. He never was going to be able to do that. He doesn't have the authority. He's not a dictator. He's the president of the United States. Insofar as he's empowered to do things at all, he's done a very, very good job. Add to this some minor victories. One of his first was the VA overhaul, reforming the VA. Now, the VA, I can remember back in like the 90s and stuff, every other month there was a news story about some corrupt shit at the VA. You haven't heard as much about that lately, have you? That was one of the first things he did as president. Now, of course, there are plenty of things that Trump has done that I don't support. One of his first acts was also optioning opening up CIA black sites, which are blatantly unconstitutional. They violate the Fourth Amendment, civil rights and human rights on a mass scale. He ended up not doing that, but the mere fact that he proposed it was wrong. He did some airstrikes in Syria, technically speaking, an act of war. I opposed it, and I made it very clear that I opposed it. And he hasn't been perfect in every other way either. There are so many times I'm watching Trump speak, and he almost gets to saying something that would be very poetic, very presidential, and extremely influential and great, and then he like flubs it and starts talking about something different. Like his speech style alone, I think, is probably the biggest thing I could hold against him. If he were more of a wordsmith, if he were more well-spoken and more focused in the way that he delivers his messages, his approval would be 5-10 points higher. He'd be coasting to re-election. He is his own worst enemy in that sense. I don't think he's his own worst enemy in specifically the behavior. It's how he expresses himself, linguistically, language-wise. I think he has problems with that. I wish he'd bring Melania out more. I know that she's primarily responsible for raising Barron, and they're sort of sheltering him from the political life because they see the firestorm that constantly surrounds Donald Trump and everyone associated with him. I can understand that, but it would be comforting, I think, to the nation if she had a little bit more of a foremost role. I would like to see a little bit more Melania Trump, too. I think definitely, as far as messaging, as far as the way she interacts, she's definitely a 180 from Donald Trump, and it would provide more of a counterbalance. I think it would make him more effective as a president, too, because it would provide contrast for his own messaging. But yeah, I endorse Donald Trump. I'll be voting for him. I mean, literally, even if I didn't like Trump, and I'd like him in a general sense, in a moderate sense. He's been a moderately good president. He gets moderately good support from me as a result. And that's, by the way, far and gone better than what we've had since Ronald Reagan, at least. Ronald Reagan is the last president we can say was okay. Clinton was subpar. He mainly gets credit for an economy he didn't build. Herbert Walker was a failure, complete failure. So was his son, W. Obama was a failure in most respects. His big accolades from me come from stepping out of the way on an oil boom, which is the most undemocratic thing that he could have done. He should have listened to the environmentalists and rammed our economy in the ass some more if he wanted to go far left. By the way, the leftists are actually legitimately concerned about the fact that Obama technically, on that token, was a moderate. His biggest success as president was something a Republican would do. Isn't that very interesting? And then the Cuba embargo ending, which almost immediately had repercussions and has been sort of halfway throttled back on. I think we should just open things up there myself. I'm not fearful of communists with 1950s vintage cars. I think pretty soon when Americans start going in and offering them six-figure totals for their vehicles, then they'll realize how great capitalism is, and I think the problem will largely solve itself. That's about all. Peace out.